lot of people that aren't here that do want this class.
Okay.
We thank Lisa so much for this class. Yes.
Yes.
When you say, I don't know what to ask anything that comes to your mind that has to do with appraisal. She's going to give you tons of information. Write the question down when it comes to your mind so you can ask her. I will be back. I'll be back.
Right.
But yeah, this is a great class. Thank you so much. Okay.
Sure. Okay. So, based on that information, what's the GLA?
3,600.
3,200.
3,400.
What is this little thing off to the side?
Sunroom.
Oh, okay, thank you.
36, 34,
30,
32.
26 question mark?
Any other guesses?
Did anybody get it yet?
She did not say yes.
So let me ask the other question, and then we'll come back to what from an appraisal standpoint, what it really is. How many bedrooms and bathrooms?
4, 3.5.
6 bed.
Oh,
3.
I say 4.5.
That's a
6.
half bath.
Oh, that's a half bath.
Okay, so
okay.
5
5
bed,
bedrooms.
5 bed.
6 baths. 6 beds, 6
4.5
baths.
baths.
4.5 baths.
I say 5, 4.5.
5, 4.5.
4.5.
6 and 6.
Yeah.
Oh, no, excuse me.
So somebody said 3.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna add a bedroom. 5
Hold on.
bathrooms. I say 4.5 bedrooms.
4.5 bedrooms?
Guys, the
Oh,
no, I'm thinking bathrooms. Sorry.
It's
0 bedrooms.
Yes.
Oh, 0 bedrooms, half bath. Back this up. I need
6 and 5.
4 bedrooms.
So we're kind of all over the map here, aren't we?
4 bedrooms, 3.5.
There's a lot of discussion, one way or the other. Let me tell you from an
5
appraiser
lots.
standpoint, this house is 2,000 square feet, and it's a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath. Yep. Everybody okay with that?
Wow, okay.
Interesting. So the sunroom's not counted.
Well, it depends, and I didn't give you enough information to really know for sure. So I've left it out. It could be counted. There
Okay.
could be reasons why it would
Say
be.
it one more time. This is actually
If we don't count the sunroom, 2,000 square feet, 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 bath, 2,000 square feet. And we'll talk about the sunroom, why it could be added to that or might not.
So why does the basement?
Yeah, why-
Basements
Okay.
never count as same as above
So
grade.
here's
Below
where
grade's different value.
maybe we could go to the next slide. I don't know. We're going to talk about gross living area. First of all, it's above grade. So the basement doesn't mean it doesn't have value, but it's counted separately than what's above grade. So when we get to looking at the appraisal report, you'll see it in a different spot. It's still there. It still may have value, but but it's valued differently. So we're only looking at above grade.
Now, I have a question about that with the basement. What happens when half of the basement's walk out? Your whole half is above grade and then the front is below grade?
It's still a basement.
It's still a basement.
If any of it is below grade,
Okay.
it's the whole thing is a basement.
Okay.
So if I'm standing in the basement, my feet need to be above grade no matter where I'm walking in the basement. And then it's not a basement if my feet are above grade all the way through. If anywhere that I'm walking, they're below grade, it's a basement, and then the whole thing is below grade. It still may have value. Some of it may be finished, maybe some of it isn't. There may be bedrooms, there may be not. That still matters, but it's just valued differently than above grade space. The other thing for GLA is it has to be contiguous space. So you know that mother-in-law suite or whatever that was above the garage, that's above grade, and it was finished. But to get to it, you have to leave the house and go up another set of stairs somewhere. So that's not counted in the GLA of the house. Yes, ma'am?
Does a breezeway count as contiguous? Or does it need to be like indoor contiguous?
It really does need to be
There's
indoor.
a lot of improperly marked things in the MLS.
Yes.
Oh,
A lot
and you have
improperly
no
marked.
idea how this makes appraisers crazy.
Sure.
Um,
Makes me crazy.
And some of it, I mean, on one hand, FMLS fault because
Sure.
they
They
give you
allow
one space for square footage. You don't get the
property,
option
yeah,
of
everyone
putting
has to have
multiple. And they don't give guidance on what should go there.
Mhm.
But therefore, realtors do it all different. Some do it the way an appraiser would, some add the basement, some add that mother-in-law suite, some add the sunroom, some do, some don't. So now I'm an appraiser trying to appraise a 3,000 square foot house, and I search by 3,000 square feet. And as I do more research, I find out it's a 2,000 square foot house. That's a big difference. It's not comparable anymore. So it's frustrating, and that's why I want you to understand what appraisers are doing, how they're calculating some of these things. So it has to be above grade, it has to be contiguous, it has to be finished, which is why that attic doesn't get added. Now later, the owner of this house might finish that out into a lovely master suite. It's heated, it's cooled, it's finished, it's got another bathroom, it's, whatever. That then would be added to the GLA for this property. But as it is right now, that attic is not finished, so it doesn't count as part of the square footage of the house. It has to be heated and cooled. This is why the sunroom question, I didn't give you enough information, and to your point, Katie, would that be counted or not? It depends.
That's why I asked about the attic, because there are some attics that see what I'm saying, but yeah.
But even if the attic was heated and cooled, if it's not finished,
Right, not yet, but.
if they've
it could
put
be.
if they've put the HVAC in, but that's as far as they've gotten, it's still not counted.
Sure.
The sunroom could have been like a side porch that they finished in, they closed in, but they haven't added any air ducts or whatever out to it. So it's really not a 12-month room. It would not be included in the GLA.
So the room has to have an air duct into it.
Yeah, it needs to be,
Okay.
it needs to be heated and cooled, or at least heated, and in this part of the country, usually that also means cooled, but at least heated. Yeah. So those are the main criteria we're looking at in what makes the square footage of a house. So when you're looking at an appraisal report, and the square footage doesn't come out to what you thought it should, this is why. This is what we're counting in the square footage of the house. Now, like I said, that doesn't mean that the basement, particularly if it's a finished basement, doesn't add value to the house, but it adds value at a different rate typically. And so that's why it's counted separately. And again, we'll look at the appraisal report in a minute, and you can see where they're separated. This also tells you why, from my standpoint, this was a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath. Because the same thing, the bedrooms and bathrooms I'm counting are the ones that fit within the GLA. So that's where I got my count for that house. Questions?
And that's like a
Don't they
consistent thing.
sometimes count bedrooms in the basement that are walkout? I know you said that's not part of this, but
Again,
that
it
can be
could be a
counted.
bedroom,
right.
but it's counted as basement space. So it's not counted in the bedroom count
On the
for the
appraisal.
house. So we'll
For the
look at the
appraisal.
appraisal report in just a minute, so you can see where the differences are. There could be bedrooms in the basement, of course there could be. But in the original bedroom count of the house, only the ones that fall within the GLA, within the above grade finished space, are counted in the bedroom count. So when you'll look at the appraisal report, it may say that it's got 6 rooms, 3 bedrooms, and 2 bathrooms. There may also be a finished basement that has bedrooms and bathrooms, but that's gonna be in a different space where you're gonna see that registered.
Okay.
Let's talk about bedrooms, because there's a lot of discussion or confusion about what constitutes a bedroom, what characteristics does a room have to have to be considered a bedroom. So one is, it's gotta be big enough to put a bed in.
Someone told me it was 7 by 7.
Well,
Is 10 by 10 correct?
you know, there's different appraisers may look at it a little differently. I'm working with some buyers right now that we've seen a couple houses in the last few weeks where they had rooms counted as bedrooms that you could not get a twin bed in at all. Or you could get the twin bed in, but then the closet door couldn't open. Well, you know, to me, that's not a bedroom. If you can't even get a twin bed, forget king or queen, that's not a bedroom. That is, you know, there's a little give on that. If it was 10 by 9, would I consider it a bedroom? Yeah, probably, if it had the other things that I needed. You know, that's not as hard and fast. But, I mean, it needs to be big enough to hold a bed and another piece of furniture.
Sorry.
Yes,
I was
ma'am.
also told that it has to be, like, the roof pitch has to be at a high enough level where you couldn't count the square footage below, like, a certain, does that make sense? Like in attics, even if it's a
Yes.
finished attic, you can't count, or like over a garage, a lot of times people have a room, and you're like, why isn't this counted as a bedroom? But like the slope of the, so like ceiling, you can't count the floor underneath that. Is that
Well, so that isn't as much to do with bedrooms as
Uh-huh.
just how we measure square feet.
okay.
So in an attic or a bonus room over a garage where you've got a pitched roof, you may have floor space that goes all the way to the wall, but then at the wall it's only 3 feet high, and then it pitches up from there. We don't, or typically are not supposed to measure all the way to that wall. We measure as far as you can walk. So sort of to a 5-foot kind of level at least. And that's how much of the bonus room we're gonna measure. So there is some floor space where you could put, you know, dressers or shelves or whatever down there, so there's usable space, but it's not, you can't stand up in it. Yep. The next thing everybody hears about is a closet. I'm gonna say there are circumstances where there's some give to this. Homes that were built in the 1920s weren't built with closets. People used pieces of furniture to store their clothes. So if you're working in an area where the homes are that old, the bedrooms may not have closets in them. So am I gonna say this house has no bedrooms? No, you know, we're gonna be logical. Would I make adjustments based on that? Maybe or maybe not. It depends what else I'm comparing against around and whether that's typical for the market. I may make adjustments to say that that's functionally obsolescent, which is to say it doesn't meet today's market expectations. You know, buyers now expect there to be a closet. So anything that's been built in the last 50 years or so, I'm gonna expect closets. But if it's older than that, if they're not there, I'm gonna look at the market and see kind of if that matches the market. So you hear that a bedroom has to have a window. It's not a window per se that's the important thing. It's that you have to be able to get to the outside of the house in the case of a fire. So if it's got French doors out to the patio or French doors out to a deck, that meets that requirement. So it doesn't have to be a window per se, but it has to have exterior exit capability. Assuming it has a window, not all windows are created equally. If you are in a basement where the window is kind of high up and sort of like a transom type window, you know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
So that to get to that, well, first of all, the window may not even open. Secondly, to get to it, you have to climb on a chair, onto a dresser to get to it. And thirdly, only an 8-year-old can fit through it. This does not help us. You still can't escape if there's a fire. So the window has to be in a position and in a size that will allow anybody in this room to get out if there was a fire and you couldn't go out the door. You know, the fire was in the hallway and you were trapped, you could get out through the window. So not all windows are created equal, but generally that rule is correct. There needs to be some way out of the house. A bedroom has to have access to a full bathroom on the same floor. So if you've got a den kind of a room on the main level, has a window, has a closet, big enough to be a bedroom, but the only bathroom on that level is a half bath, I'm gonna call that room a den, not a bedroom. Or an office, or a bonus room, or a whatever, it wouldn't matter, it's finished space, but I'm not calling it a bedroom, because you need to be able to get to a bathroom, full bathroom.
So all these places that say master on main, but they only have a half bath on the main, as not even an actual bedroom, much less a master.
Wow.
Correct.
Oh, I'm just so angry right now. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry?
No, not with you. You're great.
You have to be able to get into this bedroom without going through another bedroom. So think about, like, this is the upstairs, you got bedrooms, you've got bathrooms, and you've got this bonus room over the garage, right? So it's got a door here into this room, and this room has a door into the hallway. The only way to get to this room is coming from the hallway through this room into this one. So now, it doesn't matter if they have closets and windows and they're big and spacious and all that kind of stuff. One or the other of them can be a bedroom, but not both. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If this one had stairs that went down into the family room below, that's behind the garage, would that solve the problem?
Yeah.
Now can they both be bedrooms?
Yeah.
Does this one still have access to a bathroom?
Oh, through the other bedroom.
Through the other bedroom.
Oh, so you can't even access the bathroom.
So if this room, if it doesn't have access, without going through this bedroom, have access to get into it and to get to a bathroom, I'm gonna still call it a bonus room. Again, it doesn't mean it doesn't have value. It doesn't mean that it's not part of the square footage of the house, but I'm not gonna call it a bedroom. Does any of that matter in terms of bedroom counts or bathroom counts? If you wanted to call it a bedroom and call it a 4-bedroom or a 5-bedroom house, and I'm calling it a 4-bedroom house, does that matter?
Yes.
Yeah, because when I list it, I need to make sure to appraise it.
It impacts
when
the,
you do comps.
The buyer, yeah, whoever wants to come in and buy
So I'm gonna say from an appraisal standpoint, it does, but it doesn't. Or it may, but it may not. Because more often, appraisers make adjustments based on square footage than on bedroom counts. So this was still finished space. Even if I'm calling it a bonus room, it's still finished space and it added value to the house. Where I would make adjustments probably for bedroom counts, for example, a 2-bedroom versus a 3-bedroom. That could be a very different buyer pool, or a 1-bedroom condo versus a 2-bedroom condo. So I'm really gonna try, if it's only a 2-bedroom property, house, condo, it doesn't matter. If it's a 2-bedroom property, I'm gonna compare with other 2-bedroom properties. So then I'm not having to make bedroom adjustments, because I'm not comparing it with a 3-bedroom house. I'm comparing it only with other 2-bedroom properties. If you've got a 5-bedroom house or a 6-bedroom house, does that matter?
Can't you compare those to 4s a lot easier?
I mean, so think about it from a buyer standpoint. Do you think a buyer will pay more to have 6 bedrooms in their house than to have 5? A typical buyer.
No. Who needs that many bedrooms for
yes, they,
it. Yeah, I would
they
say
would, wouldn't they?
4 is very different
I think
from
it's a
3, but 5 is
perception
not very
thing.
different from 6.
I think it's a perceived value from the buyer's perspective. They believe it has more, but I don't think a buyer is going to
Actually,
actually pay more.
I think you're right, because most families nowadays don't need 6 bedrooms to accommodate the family. They may want a guest room, they may want an office for somebody to work from home, they may want a playroom, they may want other things. But an actual bedroom, 6 versus 5, a lot of buyers don't care. They care about the space because they want to use it as a playroom or an office or whatever. But if it's really classified officially as a bedroom or not, a lot of buyers don't care.
So you're saying it
Of
doesn't
that
change
size.
the value?
So generally, now for any of this, I'm gonna say this a lot today, it depends. So
Right.
appraisers are gonna look at the market and see in that market, is there a difference for 4-bedroom and 5-bedroom, or for 5-bedroom and 6-bedroom? And is that because it's a bedroom? Or is it just bigger, more square footage? Most of the time, when you get above 3 bedrooms, adjustments are made for square footage, not for bedroom counts. Most of the time. There could be exceptions, you know, depends, but mostly, you know, a 4-bedroom house is gonna have more square footage than a 3-bedroom house. And that's where we'd be making the adjustments. I'm trying to think of anything else bedroom-wise. Another thing that I wanted to touch on that I didn't put in the slides, but what's the rule on how far from the subject I'm gonna search for comps?
2 miles.
2 miles. That was like half mile.
I was gonna say a mile.
1 mile.
Yeah, 1 mile.
Okay.
I mean, depends.
Well, so
Yeah,
yes, that's a good response. Yeah.
Isn't it true that they all have to be in the same school district?
Okay. So we've got a bunch of different answers here, right?
I think it depends on the number that you find available. Because
So-
first, won't they look in the neighborhood?
Exactly.
So the first thing is there is no rule.
What?
So that was a trick question. There is no rule. There are, however, guidelines. And general guidelines are, if it's an urban area, like say a condo in downtown Atlanta, half a mile. If it's suburban, a mile. If it's rural kind of area, could be 5 miles. But within that, we have to take other things into consideration, like the school district. Now, would I ever use a comp from another school district? Maybe.
You
If,
can't find anything else?
well, or if the house is absolutely such a perfect match, everything about it is a perfect match, and I do research on these 2 school systems, and one of them is rated 15th in the state of Georgia, and the other one's rated 16th. If they're that similar, is there really gonna be a huge premium or difference to one or the other? Maybe not. If one of them's rated 15th and the other is 273rd, that's gonna matter. Yeah, that's a very different story. So I'm definitely gonna consider school systems and try to stay within the school system and usually be within the school system. But there could be circumstances where you have to go out. Another circumstance would be if you have a really unusual house. Whether it's because of the size doesn't match that area, if it's got amenities that don't match anything
The year
else.
built.
I'm sorry?
The year built.
Could be,
Yeah.
yeah.
You say unusual, that could be contemporary homes, because they're a lot different.
It could be if you've got a real contemporary home in a very traditional neighborhood. Yes, I'll look at that neighborhood and look at, you know, what similar size and all similar everything else. But I might also go look and see what contemporary homes in nearby neighborhoods have done. Typically, we'll try to stay within the same county as well. So what do you do if that's the county line, here's your subject, their back fence is the county line?
You go that way.
Okay, so one thing is I'm gonna, instead of doing a mile around, because now that puts it in a different school system that may be very different, I may go 2 miles around in that direction instead. The other thing, do any of you guys work in the Morningside area? Or know that area? So Morningside is within the city of Atlanta, right?
Right.
But the DeKalb-Fulton County line kind of goes right through there, but right through the area, but the city of Atlanta crosses over onto the DeKalb County side. So in that case, a house over here that's in a different county, but it's still in the city of Atlanta, so it's still the city of Atlanta School District, it's still Springdale Park Elementary. This might be comparable to this, just because, even though it's a different county, but because the school districts are the same.
Do you look at the taxes though?
Taxes can make a difference, but, school district I would look at
Stronger.
more highly, yeah.
Okay.
If, let's say I'm in a more rural area where there aren't gonna be a lot of sales, and maybe I go 2 miles, I go 3 miles, I'm not finding anything, and so then I decide, well, what if I went over to this other county? I'm gonna compare the school districts to that county, but I'm also gonna look at what's the tax difference in that other county. You know, is there a reason that one would prefer one county or the other? Is there a reason that they're comparable or a reason that they're not? So that's distance. What's the rule on how old the comps are gonna be that I'm looking at? How far back in time will I go to look for comps?
6 months.
Okay,
3?
3 months?
I think it's just gonna depend again.
A year?
I think 6
There are
months.
no rules.
Yeah.
Depends on what's around.
And we're back to, there's not a rule, but there are guidelines. You know, lenders would prefer that all 3 comps that you use sold last week.
Of course they would.
Realistically, that doesn't happen very often. So normally we try to stay within 6 months. But I will go back farther than that if the sales were better. If within 6 months I can only find, let's say, 2 sales that really are good comps and there's just nothing else, I'm gonna do, I can't speak for all appraisers, but I'm gonna do 2 things. I'm gonna both look within 6 months but on a farther away, and I'm gonna stay within my original search area but look older and see which I find better solutions to. Either way, you may have to make adjustments, because if it's an older sale, I may have to adjust for the fact that the market is going up or not.
So then how do you account for like seasonability? Cause here obviously, like we were saying that the number of solds and like the prices are better in the spring versus like the winter. So if we look at, if we're buying in like April or whatever, and we're looking at all the December, November price points, I feel like that's gonna be off. That's why I don't personally look that far out, because it's a completely different time of year.
Well, and it's tough for appraisers in March,
Sure.
because sales prices are we've seen earlier, sales prices are starting to go up, right? But appraisers are having to look at actual closed sales. Well, what closed in the last, even if we go 90 days, which some lenders will say they want at least 1 or 2 within 90 days. Have there been closed sales within 90 days that support your higher contract price? Not necessarily. So it's tough at that time of year. Now, we can make time adjustments, which is that, you know, today's market is not the same as whatever the day's market when that other sale closed, and we can make adjustments for that, but we have to be able to support that. So it can't just be a gut feel, wow, it's March, prices are going up. We need some statistical data to show what kind of change is being made and at what rate, so that if I adjust by 3%, where did I get that 3%? You know, I need to be able to support that, that it wasn't just some random number that I came up with. When y'all are newer in the business, but in the 2008, 9, 10 time period when the whole market tanked, a lot of lenders were requiring sales within the last 90 days because the market was going down so quickly that even a 6-month-old comp was not necessarily relevant anymore. So they were wanting really current stuff. That was also the time period when lenders started asking us to put listings in the report. We're required to have 3 closed sales. We can add any more than that that we feel are relevant or necessary to help us support the value, but we're not required by our rules or ethics or whatever of the profession to include listings. But a lot of lenders started requiring it during that time period, and some still do, some don't. But so you may see in an appraisal report some current listings or current things under contract, and that would either be because the lender has required it, or that the appraiser feels like it helps state their case for whatever their value was. So that might be something we would do in the spring as well. Well, this is under contract down the street. It's not gonna close until next week or in 2 weeks, but it's under contract for X price. So that can help us support that the market is on an upward trend.
How does like your neighbor just sells their house for a low price? Do you ever, like, if there's one where it's like, wow, like,
They got
okay,
it,
I
yeah,
found
ASAP.
3 great properties in the neighborhood. 2 of them are really close supporting my price. This third one, I don't know, they just sold it for 30,000 less than the
Yeah.
rest.
Like train stations, neighbor?
Yeah, so I can't speak for all appraisers,
Right.
but I can tell you what I do is, first of all, I'm gonna look at condition, because in transitional neighborhoods, the house next door could have sold for 50,000
Right.
less. And it's legit, because it's not in good condition, and this one is. So that's one thing I would definitely look at was condition. But the other thing I'll do, is, and this, we'll talk later about some of the reasons I call people after. I will call an agent that was involved in that transaction, and maybe it closed 4 months ago, but I'll call the agent and ask questions. What can you tell me about this? It looks like, based on everything I'm seeing, I would have thought it sold for 300, but ish.
Right.
But it sold for 275. What can you tell me about the house? And maybe they say, you know, it was an estate and the family just wanted to get out from under it. Maybe they tell me, well, we found out during the inspection that there were massive foundation issues, so we had to lower it. Okay, that's information I want to know, because I'm now probably not going to use that as a comp. I may put in my report, there was another sale in the neighborhood that on paper looks good, but in speaking with parties knowledgeable about the transaction, it was discovered, blah, blah, blah. So that if an underwriter is looking and saying, there was another sale down the street that you didn't use, why not? They've already got it in my report. This is in my kind of later on, but I'll say it now since we're on the subject. I really encourage you guys, if you get a call from an appraiser far after your closing, it could be months later, please try to be helpful and give them information that they need, whatever it is that they're calling about, and we'll talk about some of the reasons, but it helps make their job easier. But think about it in another way. Let's say Kiki's got a property under contract for 300,000. I'm the appraiser. I'm I'm coming up with 290 to 295 maybe. I call Katie to get information on the sale she had a few months ago. She doesn't return my call. She doesn't return my text. She doesn't answer me in any way. So now all I have is what's on paper. So now I value this property at 292. Okay, Kiki's mad at me, the other agent's mad at me, the buyer's mad at me, the seller's mad at me. But they agree, and maybe everybody kicks in a little and they close at 295. Okay, now what? What does that mean for the rest of you?
It changes the whole area.
Just lower the property.
Just lower the property
Exactly.
value.
That 295 is now a comp for the area. That's a closed sale, that's now the comp. So now when you're trying to list a property in that area, that's, the 295 is gonna be what appraisers are gonna be looking at, not the 300 that it was under contract for initially, and all because Katie didn't return my call.
Oh,
Katie.
Actually, so I had someone in Florida call me, and I thought it was a scam. I truly didn't know you guys did that, so that's very eye-opening. I won't do this anymore. I answered questions, but in a very limited manner, because I truly thought this was like some kind of, gotcha, here's your 10 grand fine. So I mean, like I was just trying to protect CYA.
I mean, I don't necessarily call every agent for every comp that I ever use, but we'll look at later, there are a lot of reasons that I would call
Fair.
an agent to try and get more information. Typically, I'll call the listing agent, but if they don't get back with me, or if what I'm trying to get is to do with maybe the buyer's financing or something, then I may call the buyer's agent, because I may feel like they know better. And there have been cases where I've called both. Yeah.
Oh, I've had people say to put off-market deals on the MLS for this reason.
Yes.
How does one do that? Because I have that right now. Like an off-market deal. Like I'm selling a lot and it's not listed on the MLS. It was just by Toxies because they went to see the house that's next
As
to
far
it.
as I know, you can still list it.
And then pay the MLS
You
fee.
may have had experience with this that I
Yeah, you ever
haven't,
see
but
ones that go
you
list and sell in the same like.
yeah.
I'm just
And
I'm
you
trying to
can
get around the
put-
MLS fee.
You can put in the remarks or in
Mhm.
the private remarks, sold before list or something, so that people know that it
Gotcha.
it was a under contract deal before you ever put it in.
Okay.
People don't do that because they want to save the FMLS fee. But it can turn around and bite you in the behind, because then that sale is not readily available for somebody to use as a comp.
So there's no way to do it without paying that .0012? That's my question. That's basically what I'm asking.
Yeah.
No.
No, there's no.
Sorry.
That's sorry. Kate.
Okay.
Sorry.
Just kidding.
Yeah, wouldn't you love it? Okay, time, distance, bedrooms, GLA, anything else on any of those things? Let's look at reading an appraisal report. So you've got a report in front of you. And I'm gonna talk about a couple of different areas. Like I said, appraisal reports can be, 30 pages long. Some of it is you'll find interesting, but some you won't. So I'm giving you the first 2 pages that have the most information that's relevant to you. So this is the top of the first page. It's gonna have the basic information about the property, the address, the county, the property tax ID, the property taxes, the HOA fees, all of the basic data about the house. It's also going to have information about any prior listings and also the contract details, because most of what you guys are going to be working with, something is under contract. I will also say that all this stuff is totally made up, so don't be looking for any of this. The bones of this came from the appraisal software company that I use has some sample reports that they use for training. I've modified it because I wanted some specific information to show you where to find. But so everything in here is made up. But we are required to look at the contract and analyze and put any information in about the contract. A lot of appraisers will say how many pages the contract was that they got. So that if later somebody says, well, there was an amendment that did XYZ, well, that wasn't in the 22 pages of contract details that I got in the first place. I only can work with what I got. We should get the purchase and sale agreement. We should get all the exhibits. As amendments happen, we should probably get those as well. It kind of depends what the amendment is. If it's an amendment to address concerns, it may not ever get sent to us. It certainly, if it changes the price, if it changes the seller concessions, we will get a copy of that, and I'll get a revision request from the lender asking me to revise the report to match the new details of the contract. Any questions on that part? That's basic data kind of stuff. Okay. The next section I want you to look at is at the very bottom of the first page, the sort of grid area there. This is information about the subject property. This is where you're going to see that this house is 7 rooms, 3 bedrooms, and 2 baths, but that's above grade. Look up here. It also says it's got a full basement of 655 square feet that's 50% finished. And we'll see on the next page where that is taken a step further. Any questions on any of that piece of it? This should be basic data about the house. It's not making any judgments about it at this point, or whether it's better or not as good as anything else that's going on. It's basically just data about the house. In this, down here, you'll start seeing some codes, which you'll start seeing on the second page as well. There is a full page in the report that explains what all those codes are. We used to put in things for the condition or for quality of construction on things like excellent, good, average, poor. And and a few years ago, they sort of standardized a lot of our comments and what we can do. And part of it was to try and give more precision to what some of those words mean. What you think is average and what I think is average could be different. And so
make it
they're,
more objective?
I'm sorry?
To make it more objective, basically?
Trying, and so when you look at the page that describes those, there's a description of what a C3 condition means in terms of how renovated or not the property is. So it does help to kind of to take out any of, well, I think it's much more specific. The other thing that this one, I should have put in something that had updates so that you could see how that works, but we are specifically required to make note of any recent updates in the kitchen or the bathrooms. And so when I'm going to a house and I meet the homeowner there, that I specifically ask them, what, if any, updates have you done in the kitchen or bathrooms recently? Now, maybe there've been none, maybe there've been some, whatever. So then we clarify it by a time frame. So kitchen was updated 1 to 5 years ago. Bathroom was updated within the last year. But let's say the master bath was updated, but the hall bath was not. I'm gonna specify that in my comments and say when the master was updated, but the hall bath has not been. This is an area where agents can help us if the house that we're going to see is vacant, so I'm not gonna see a seller, or the seller's gonna be at work, and I'm gonna let myself in with the lockbox. I still need the answers to these questions. So if you can help get those answers, you may know, because if you've got the house listed, you may know when the updates were made. But that's an area that you can help us get that information. Any other questions about that?
And do you read the public remarks? If like that was in there, you would take that into account?
I definitely read the public remarks, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so this is now page 2. And this is the grid where we're comparing subject with comps. We're not comparing one comp with another. We're comparing a comp with the subject and making adjustments for that. This is where you can see some of the other rooms that are counted. So you can see the subject is 732, 1655 square feet, but it also has a basement. That's 1655 square feet, of which 827 square feet is finished, and the WO means it's a walkout basement. There are different categories for, you know how some basements you can come up inside, but there's no exterior exit. So that's what those codes mean. And then the line below that gives you information on what the finished rooms are. So in the subject's case, RR is rec room. I mean, I use that kind of loosely if it's a family room or whatever. 1 bedroom, 1.0 baths, and no other. Down here, this one had 2 baths and 1 other. So this is where you can see where those bedrooms in the basement are factored into the equation. Yes, sir?
So now that you're a realtor and you use the CMA Cloud, so I'm sure, I don't know if you use that or not. I know that's what I use to make these appraisals. Like, do you make the adjustments in there as well? And also, how is that software compared to what you use as an appraiser?
It's not as specific as what I use as an appraiser. So you have to do a little bit of manipulation of some of your numbers. Because, for example, to get these numbers, don't even try to figure out how that was calculated, because those numbers came from behind the scenes in my software. I put in an amount for how much of an adjustment for differences in unfinished space and how much of an adjustment for differences in finished space.
Right.
And it computes all of that, and you get one number there. So, yes, ma'am.
So, say for instance you don't have another subject property that you can compare it to that is exactly the same square footage,
Yeah.
how much off, up, or down would you go?
I try to stay, it depends on what your range is,
Okay.
right? Because if you're dealing with a 1,200 square foot house, a 500 square foot difference is huge. So 10, 20% kind of is what you're gonna try to stay. Because if you're in an 8,000 square foot house, 500 square feet difference one way or the other, you probably can't even tell.
Right.
In a small house, it can make a huge difference. So I'm probably gonna try and stay within sort of 10% if I can, 20% if I have to. I'm gonna try and stay as close as I can. I'm also gonna try, this house was on a basement, I'm gonna try to find comps that were on a basement. Again, sometimes you can't. And so then you have to adjust accordingly, but I'm gonna try.
Is other room in there, like that one had one other, is that like, this is only finished?
That's only finished rooms.
Okay.
So that could be a kitchen in the basement, it could be a den, some room that I can't call it a bedroom. You might be using it as a bedroom,
Right,
but
gotcha.
I can't call it that, so I don't have it in the bedroom count.
Okay.
Could be a gym or exercise room,
Gotcha.
could be any number of things.
Okay.
Yeah. I typically make adjustments for differences in bathroom counts. Again, not so much for bedroom counts. It depends on the market though. So, sometimes.
Like if it took a house from a 2-bedroom to a 3-bedroom, you would probably make an adjustment in a neighborhood that focused on 3-bedroom houses.
Yeah, I still would try to not even compare this with a house that's got 3 bedrooms above grade.
Gotcha.
But if I have to, because this house, there's only one other house in the neighborhood that had 2 bedrooms above grade, and
Right.
so how they expanded was into the basement, and that's the only way I can evaluate. Then yeah, but that's why this is done separately, because generally speaking, people will pay more for finished space above grade than for finished space below grade. So they're adjusted at different amounts. How I adjust this will be different than how I adjust this. All of these, like I said, all the funny codes will be explained in one page of the report. This one, I've put it on a golf course. I've got golf view. So there's an adjustment in this subdivision because of being on the golf course versus off the golf course.
Does ceiling height in a basement matter? Make a difference? Cause like you have some basements that they still have 10-foot ceilings and you're like, this doesn't even feel like a basement. And there's windows out on one side.
Yeah, but generally speaking, aren't you gonna be comparing that with a house that's kind of similar to that?
That's fair.
So it probably doesn't matter from the
Gotcha.
standpoint, that
I
you're
see what you're
comparing
saying.
with houses that are in that
Apples
same
to apples,
subdivision
yeah.
that are similar.
Gotcha.
But that reminds me of something I meant to say earlier and forgot. When we were talking about the distance and how far around I would go, and I said generally speaking, there's not a rule how far, but there is one rule that's imposed not by the standards of our profession as a whole, but by the state of Georgia. And it is a state of Georgia law that we must use comps in the subdivision, barring a credible reason not to. So what would be a credible reason not to? There haven't been any sales in the subdivision, right? So I have to go outside the subdivision. Or,
What if they're completely different properties?
that's the next thing, like, so you've got some great big subdivisions where sort of this area is 2,000 square foot houses. Over here, it was a different builder and they're 4,000 square foot houses. Those two houses are just not necessarily comparable. This one's a much higher construction, it's a much larger house, they do have finished basements, blah, blah, blah. So that would be a credible reason to go outside the subdivision. But we are required to use comps in the subdivision if they exist. So that's another thing that when things were starting to trash in the economy a number of years ago, and there started to be foreclosure properties. Can I use a foreclosure as a comp?
No. I would consider
It depends.
that.
Or not. If that's the market, then yes. So if you've had 10 sales in the subdivision and 9 were foreclosures, that's your market.
Wow.
But if you've had 10 sales in the subdivision and 1 was a foreclosure or a short sale or some kind of a distress, that doesn't necessarily represent the majority of the market. And if you look outside that subdivision and it's the same percentage, there are very, very few that I'm not gonna use foreclosures. But in that 2010 timeframe where, I mean, you could look back for 6 months and not find a property that wasn't a distressed sale. That's the market, that's what we had to use. Now, you're probably not gonna see foreclosures used. But we are gonna stay in the subdivision, first.
Is there a going, adjustment price for like basement versus not basement and like years difference, like say 10-year, decade difference? If you can't find anything like that absolutely is.
Yeah, it really varies by market, and you have to do a lot of research into the specific market. D.S. Murphy, one of the appraisal firms in the company, or in the area, has put together a sort of guideline to adjustments. That's a good document. I'll see if I've got it and can share it with Dory. They sent it to at one of the sessions they did here several years ago. That might help you get an idea.
Just gives you an idea. I know everything's
Yeah,
different.
but you really have to look at the market. I was in an appraisal CE class a number of years ago, and the instructor had done some research into a specific area of Smyrna at that time period, whenever this was, and her research proved that at that moment in time, in that specific area, a basement added no value.
Wow.
Yeah. Now that's not normal, right? Typically a basement does add value, but you have to look at that specific market. And it very much depends on the price range. How much do you think a buyer would pay for a pool? What do you
Pool
think?
depends. Doesn't it depend on the level of the pool? Like if they've fully like gone all out with a crazy patio and pavers, or just like there's a hole in the ground.
Like a circular hole or like
Yeah.
this kidney-shaped waterfall.
Yeah.
See, and to me, some of that would depend on the price range as well, because at a $200,000 price range, if somebody's done the whole
Right, shebang,
extensive
yeah.
thing, that may be an over improvement for that market. So they may not get their money back. I mean, you don't.
I actually had a property like that. The community itself was right around 200,000. However, I mean, there was a ceiling and there was a
Yeah.
nice pool and the yard was beautiful. But of course, I'm sure that they didn't get the amount of money they put in for that pool.
Not for that extensive of a pool
Exactly.
in that subdivision.
Exactly.
And the other thing, if you're looking at price point, if you've got a $125,000 house, will people pay anything for a pool? I mean, maybe not. A pool may add no value at all, because if they can afford only 125,000, they can't pay 10 more thousand for a pool, or even
Or the
5 more
maintenance
thousand,
pool.
and they can't afford the maintenance
Some
on it.
people don't like
Oh,
And
yeah.
some people don't like pools.
Yeah.
So all of the adjustments really depend on the market, and it depends on the overall price point of the property. The dollar per square footage adjustment that I make is very different in this price range than it would be in a $1.5 million price range.
Pools must be interesting in Atlanta because you have so many neighborhoods with swim tennis.
Yeah,
And
but
not a
sometimes you
lot
have
of
to pay for
individual
it to be part of
pools.
sometimes.
Because
So then you have to look at that.
you try to
If
find
there's
houses
already
with
a
pools.
swim tennis in the subdivision,
Yeah.
that's part of your HOA fee that you're paying anyway.
Right.
Will a buyer pay more for a property that has a pool in their backyard?
A heated one that they can use
No, but
longer of
probably-
the year.
So
probably.
maybe they will,
But it
but
depends on
maybe
the
not.
buyer.
Yeah.
Really depending upon what the buyer's willing to pay for it,
Yeah.
is what you're saying.
And so we're looking at what the market as a whole. Now, do you have a buyer that would pay 20,000 more for that pool? Maybe.
Some people, yeah.
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 But the market as a whole, will they pay 20,000 more for that pool? Not necessarily.
So do you look for pool properties then when you have a property with a pool?
If my subject has a pool, I'm looking for sales that had a pool.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yep. This is the very bottom of page 2 of the report you've got. This section at the top is where I'm gonna do all kinds of explanation about the comps I chose, why I chose the ones I did, how they compare against the subject, why I made the adjustments that I did, why I didn't make adjustments for some things that maybe you would think I should have adjusted for, but maybe there was a reason I didn't. Any of that explanation, and it never fits in the box that they do for you. So you're often going to see something like that. So there will be either the third page of the report, which at the bottom of the third page has calculating the income or the cost approach if we've added those two approaches to value. But the top has some just blank space. So it may be there. Mine usually isn't there either because there's a bunch of sort of canned comments that were required by the state of Georgia to include in our report. And so I typically have a whole other page that's in a addendum kind of a page that has anything that wouldn't fit into the little boxes that they gave us. So there's a whole page of explanation. This is also where you're going to see the value. If other methods were included, those are there. But down here is where you're going to see the final value. The very bottom of the page, that's the value that's been attached to the property. And that's going to be my inspection date. So that's the effective date of the appraisal. So if a sale closed the next day, this says June 11th, if a sale closed on June 12th, I can't use it as a closed sale because it closed after my inspection date. But I have and will and do put them into the report because it did close within that time frame to support and prove my value. So I will still include it, but I still have to have 3 other closed sales that closed before that June 11th date. This piece, normally it's going to be appraised as is. But there are a couple of circumstances where it may be what's called subject to. So subject to something happening. One is going to be if it's new construction. Typically the lender will send an appraiser out like as soon as it's gone under contract. Well, the house may be pretty well built at that point if they're buying a house that was built on spec. But I've been out to where it's a vacant lot. I mean, they haven't even started digging yet. It's a vacant lot. I've been to ones where they've done all the framing, but that's as far. I've been to ones where it's kind of mostly done, but no appliances. So that's going to be the first one, that this appraisal is subject to the completion of the home to the plans and specs that we were given. So it's assuming that it's finished to the same quality level that I was told it was going to be finished to. The next one is subject to repairs, and we'll talk in a minute about FHA. So that's if there are required repairs for FHA. The last one is a required inspection. So that would be something like I find massive, huge cracks that I'm not qualified to tell if this means this is normal settling or there's a real problem with this foundation. I'm going to require an inspection by somebody who is qualified to make that distinction. Yep.
And I think I'm just getting things a little confused here. Like, but if it were like we were buying a property and you were looking at this, that should have already been in the inspection report that you would have received, right?
Yeah, I'm not doing an inspection the way you all get an inspector. You get RIA or Home Probe or whoever to come out and do an inspection. So I'm not going to that extent, even on an FHA inspection.
But if you saw like a big crack, you would probably check the inspection and say, oh, this.
I don't get a copy of the inspection report.
Okay.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. So now I might get, if after that inspection, they sent out a foundation expert that gave a report that said this is normal and this is fine, I might get a copy of that report. Or when I send it subject to needing an inspection, that's already happened, so now the lender sends me a copy of that report, so I can remove that restriction on this report. The lender has to ultimately get something that's as is. If any of this subject to is in there, they're gonna require that we go back at some point to revisit whatever the issue was. Yes.
So do you have certain things that you look for in regards to an FHA approval? Is it just, you look at whatever their guidelines are and you search for those things?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll get to some FHA slides and show you some specifics, yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the process of kind of what happens from when I get an order through after closing. So first of all, I'm gonna get an order probably from an appraisal management company. It's definitely, I never speak with the loan officer. So you're talking to Jim Heitzer, working on the loan. I will never have any communication with Jim, ever. I probably will never have any communication with CBC. I have had a few exceptions to that, but generally I will not. The appraisals now, again, after the whole crisis a number of years ago, typically come through what's called an appraisal management company, which is kind of a middleman. It was done to help prevent either lenders and appraisers kind of colluding to make a value come up, or, to make a sale happen, or lenders putting pressure on appraisers to say, if you can make this happen, I can get you a whole lot more work. There will be a lot more work coming your way if I can get this 300. That kind of pressure inflates values. So those reasons the AMCs were put in the middle. Why this is important to you is you need to understand that takes time in the process. So if your lender doesn't order the appraisal until 4 days before your appraisal contingency expires, you're gonna be in a world of hurt getting that appraisal back, because depending on how the AMC does their processing, they may assign it to a particular appraiser because that person lives nearby or their office is nearby or whatever. But there are others that sort of put it out to a bid to 20, 50, whatever appraisers, and are looking to get whoever will do it cheapest and fastest. Now, in my mind, that's not necessarily getting you the best product, but there you go. And that can take a few days. Once I get an order that I've accepted from an appraisal management company, I'm gonna call to schedule an appointment. I will tell you that 90%, 95% of the time, the order that comes to me lists the buyer's agent, because that's who is working with the borrower and that's who the lender has some kind of a relationship with. I will tell you that about 95% of the time, I ignore that and call the listing agent. The reason is, it just saves me a phone call, because I'm gonna have to call the listing agent anyway. If the house is occupied, the listing agent is the one who has the relationship with the seller and knows, what their schedule is and can get in touch with them and set up an appointment or whatever. If the house is vacant, the buyer's agent can tell me, oh, it's vacant, don't worry, it's on a lockbox, here's where the lockbox is, go for it, any time is good. I get there, and there's no lockbox. And call the listing agent, oh, I needed it for another listing, so I moved it. And I moved it to my other listing. Or I get there is a lockbox, I let myself in and set off the alarm. Because now that it's under contract and they don't have people running through it constantly, they're setting the alarm again. So I call the listing agent to set up the appointment.
Be nice.
Real nice.
You have no idea. So I call an agent and say, I have been asked to do an appraisal of this property you have under contract at blah 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 street, and the first thing out of their mouth, this is a true story, first thing out of their mouth is, where do you live? In exactly that kind of tone of voice.
Wow.
Now, we can talk about the question itself and whether I think that's valid or not, but just think about that energy that comes across that at that point. And think about if you're working with an appraiser who's not as ethical as I am. If we get to Kiki's $300,000 sale price, and I'm coming up with $290,000, $295,000,
That's what you get.
how motivated am I going to be to try to say, I wonder if something's going on. What am I missing here? What am I not seeing that maybe would cause it to be 300? You know? Exactly. Too bad for you. So, you know, be nice. Even if the last appraisal you had was a bad experience, don't put that onto the next appraiser that comes your way. Okay, so now we've got an inspection schedule. So there's several questions here. One is, should you be at the inspection? I personally would rather that the realtor not be there, and I can tell you why. But if you want to be there, then I've got some guidelines for you to make sure that it goes smoothly. There's the first one. Continue to be nice. So the next thing is providing comps. I'm fine with realtors providing me with comps. I don't have a problem with that. Some appraisers don't like it. Some will have the attitude of, you know, I don't need you to tell me how to do my job. I look at it as, I know that I am competent and conscientious and I work hard to do the right thing, but I'm also human. So I want to be sure I haven't missed anything. So if you want to provide me with the comps that you use to price the property, I'm fine with that. I will probably, my process is typically that I will do my work and then look at your comps so that I can not be swayed by whatever you presented me with. And so a lot of times then what a realtor has provided me just confirms, I mean, it's the same comps I used. But if it's not, I'm gonna look at what you've given me to see why or did I miss anything. But I'm telling you, please provide comps that are relevant. I mean, I had one that the purchase price was mid-500s. Vacant house, the agent said, do you mind if I leave you a folder on the kitchen counter with some comps? Not at all, please do, happy to have them. He provided 10 or 12 comps. Okay, that's way too many. I don't need that many. That's the first thing. Secondly, for this 500 and something, 565 house, the comps ranged from 400 to 950.
Stop.
Okay, these are not all comparable to this house, right? They're just not. So I know you want it to be worth a lot, but that doesn't mean a $950,000 property is comparable to here. So just don't give it, don't try to push it, be real. But I will say, if that $400,000 sale on paper looks like it would be comparable, but you know, because of the research you've done or because you know the market or whatever, you know something about that property that makes it not comparable, then do provide that with a note on it of what's going on with that house. It had the massive foundation issues or whatever. So if there's something that seems on paper like it would be a comparable, you know it's not good, make a note on it and do provide that. But otherwise, please be reasonable. Provide comps that really are relevant. It can really be helpful if we've got a list of any upgrades, renovations, changes, add-ons, any of that kind of thing that you know about. You may already have a list of that because you may have put it in the property or put a list in FMLS. So that may just be as easy as printing something out or emailing it to us or whatever. But if not, if you know some things like that, that can be really helpful to us as we're trying to compare it to other properties and compare it appropriately. This is one of the reasons that I don't like realtors to be at the house. They want the value to be what the contract price is. So they're following me around and asking questions and getting in my way. If you're gonna be there, greet up front, talk about the house, then sit in the kitchen and do your work while I'm doing my thing, and then we'll connect again at the end. But don't be following them around and asking them questions and whatever as they're doing their work. I mean, to me, it opens things up for potentially, I missed something that I would have seen, but I was chatting with you, and I forgot to take a picture of the wine cellar, and then when I get home, because it's not in my pictures, I forget there even was a wine cellar. So, you know, let them do their work. Stay out of their way and let them do their work. This is another one of my pet peeves when realtors come. Realtors are busy, right? You've got another appointment. You want to be in and out of there. But do you want me to do it right? Or do you want me to get out of there in 25 minutes? When you've got a $2 million property, I'd say you want it right. So allow enough time in your schedule. If you're going to stay there for the whole thing, allow enough time so that you're not trying to push them out the door. After the inspection, I generally tell AMCs it will take 2 business days to finish the report. Can I do it faster? Sometimes, absolutely. But I don't like to promise any faster than that because I may not know until I get into it how long it's really going to take. If I'm having to get information from the City of Atlanta zoning office, that could take weeks. So I don't like to promise 24 hours or whatever, but it may come back faster, but just so you kind of know roughly a time frame. But after the inspection, I may call you for questions about the property, but other than that, I can't discuss the appraisal with you. So calling the appraiser to get information, to ask what the value was, any of that information, I can't tell you. I can't give you a copy of the report. I can't discuss the report with you. I can only discuss it with the client, which isn't even the borrower. The client is the lender / the AMC that ordered the appraisal. And if you call saying, you know, we need this appraisal, where is it? Well, my answer may be, I submitted it to the lender on Friday. I don't know. That's as much as I know. So, you know, you've got other avenues that you can follow up, but I can't talk to you about the appraisal itself.
Can you, I'm sorry, yeah, I think you were pretty clear, but I'm gonna ask this anyways. Can you talk to them once they've received their appraisal? If I have it and or you can't talk to them at all?
No.
Okay.
You're still not my client. The client may
Right.
have shared it with you, and that's
Right.
their prerogative to do, but you're still not my client.
Gotcha.
So I still can't talk to you about it.
Gotcha.
So, what if the appraised value is not what you were hoping for? He gets a $300,000 property and the value on it is $292. Can you do anything about that?
Yes.
The answer is yes, there are steps you can take. Will that change the value? Maybe or maybe not, but there are steps that you can take. Again, don't go directly to the appraiser. Not only can I not talk to you about it, but if there are any changes that I would consider making, I can't do it based on a realtor or the borrower coming to me asking. That it has to come through the lender. So I would, and technically it's the borrower that should be contacting the lender, but realistically, the listing agent, or sorry, the buyer's agent has a relationship with that lender and with the borrower, and so they're likely going to put together the information and send it in. But they can do it. I've done it before in collaboration with the listing agent, and we work together to come up with what information we thought should be presented. So you can, you know, kind of put your information together, but it's typically the borrower or the buyer's agent that's going to do anything. Before you do a lot of work, I would check with the lender. Some lenders have a specific form or a specific format in which they want the information presented to them. So you don't want it to be ignored just because you didn't use their right format. Some don't care, but if they do, you want to do it the way they want to see it. So start there. Start with, does the lender have a specific form or format? The best thing that you can provide is alternative comps that are better than the ones that were listed in the report. You need to have a reason why they were better. They have to truly be better. So, you know, in some of our scenarios where we were going out farther and farther, just going 3 miles away to get a $310,000 sale to use, that doesn't mean it's a better sale or a better comp than the ones that were in the report, just because it was more money and justified your value. So they need to be properties that truly are comparable, things that the appraiser missed. It could be, maybe you know about something that sold off market that you neglected to tell the appraiser about at the beginning when we were in the inspection process, and so it wasn't included, but now you can use that.
You can use off-market properties?
If I can get enough information about them, but that's the problem.
How do you determine that it was actually sold? Where do you look for that?
There are a couple places, county tax records, and there's another source called GSCCCA, .org, I think it is, which is.
What is that? Someone mentioned that before.
GSCCCA, which is Georgia Superior Court Clerks Cooperative Authority, which is, in Georgia, it's the superior courts in each county that register deeds, whatever kind of deed it is, and they then share all of their information with this central repository so that I can look up any county. It does take some time for all this to happen. It takes some time for things to get into tax records. It takes some time to get into GSCCA. How much time varies by county. So if there's an off-market property that you know about, if I still can't find it anywhere, I can't find it in tax records, I can't find it, then I can't use it. If there was an agent involved in one side or the other, but it just never got put into MLS, if you know who that was, I can contact that agent and potentially get some information, but I still need some confirmation that it actually sold.
Like a settlement statement?
Like a settlement statement would give me the price that it sold for. And the fact that it truly really did close. Yeah. But the other problem that I have with off-market properties, or that appraisers have, is I can't tell what condition it was in.
Right, you never saw the picture.
In MLS, I can look through pictures and I can see, okay, this does look kind of similar, or that hasn't had an update in 40 years. I can tell that from pictures. If it's off-market, I really can't. So can we use them? Yes, but it's a qualified yes. Yeah, we're back to it depends. Yeah, there we go. So generally your best recourse is other comps. You can look at the appraisal report, and if you remember back on the page where the grid was, I wouldn't go through and analyze every one of those adjustments, because a couple $1,000s one way or the other is probably not going to matter. But let's say, in some of these ones, this one that was on the golf course that had $5,000 and $10,000 adjustments. So a $5,000 or $10,000 adjustment matters. If it's real easy to accidentally add or forget the negative sign in front of that. So there could be one where it's got a negative sign and it shouldn't have. It should have been a positive adjustment, and that matters. So look at the big numbers, the big adjustments, and make sure they're correct. But other than that, I wouldn't be analyzing the adjustments and all of that kind of thing. Specifically, look at the comps. Was this sale that you've found better, more representative of the subject property than one or more of the ones that were in the report? Yes, ma'am.
Are listing agents always privy to that report, or is that like a kind of like an inspection, like they don't have to give it to you?
The appraisal?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean the listing agent doesn't?
Give it to who? Listing agent.
Then how am I supposed to know what comps I can like give them for alternative comps?
So the listing agent may never see this report. They're only going to see this if it's shared by the buyer's side.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. So they can share it with me.
Yes.
They don't have to.
I, as the appraiser,
They're asking you to reduce the price.
Yeah.
That was a lot. Wait.
If they're asking you to reduce the price based on a low appraisal,
Uh-huh.
it says in the contract, they have to share it with you.
Okay, heard.
It can't be,
So-
oops, I want this because.
Yeah, but if they're
So-
not asking you to lower the price, if you're all collaboratively trying, you've got comps that you think the original price is fair, and you're not trying to, nobody's trying to lower it, you're trying to get the appraisal raised to the contract price. Once I send it to my client, they can share it with whoever they want to.
Sure.
I just can't share it with you.
Fair, yeah.
So they can share it, and you can work together as both sides of the agent, of the transaction, work together to come up with comps that you think are more relevant.
So I guess what if there's like, let's say I have one listed at 200, appraisal comes in at 195, and they say it came in at 195. Is there a way to, I definitely can see what comps the appraiser used?
Only
like
if
the addresses?
Only if you get a copy of the report.
Oh, so, okay, and only if they share it with
Yeah.
you. Interesting.
So if they go Dory's route and say, appraisal came in at 195, we wanna lower the price to 195, they have to share the appraisal
Okay.
with you, so now you've got a copy of the report.
Okay, heard, thank you.
But unless it's shared with you through the buyer side,
Okay.
you don't get, there's no like central repository where we upload them so that you can see them. I can't send it to you, it has to come to you through the client.
They only have to
Thank you.
share it with you if they're trying to lower the price.
If they're trying to lower the price to the appraised value, they have to share it with you, because there has to be some proof of why they wanna lower the price. So then, with that amendment, they have to share the appraisal. But if you're working, I mean, I had one last summer that, I mean, it was wrong, I'm sorry, it was wrong. And we all were willing to, I mean, the buyer was willing to pay the full price, and the other agent and I worked together to try and make accommodations to get the contract price.
So then they shared the appraisal with you so you could work from that.
Well, I was the buyer's agent on that one, but yes, the lender shared it with me, and we agreed, the lender agreed we could share it with the other side.
What restrictions do you have as an appraiser and a realtor? Are there any?
Yeah, I have to be real careful what I say and how I say it as a realtor, because I can't say things in a way that presents that I am acting as an appraiser. So I have to be real careful how I word things, yeah.
And then are you still a practicing appraiser when you're not being a realtor?
I do some appraisals. I don't do anywhere near as many as I used to, for a couple of reasons. One, my real estate business is busier, but the other thing is I'm refusing a lot more orders. Some of it because I don't accept work, for example, for anybody from this office. So if I get an order that Katie is on either side of the transaction, I don't care which side, I'm gonna decline the order, because I don't want there to be any perception later that I was in any way biased.
Yeah.
So that's my personal decision that I decline any, and as big as this office is, and as many agents as there are, I've had more than one that I've declined.
Is there a materiality threshold? Like if you're within $2,000, you're just give it to them.
You know, an appraisal is an opinion of value, right? So appraising is part art, part science. We're looking at data, we're comparing data, but at the end of the day, it's one person's opinion.
Right.
And you know, how I value stainless steel appliances could be a little bit different than how another appraiser does. Also, appraisers will kind of round things different ways. So if I come up with a value of 292, some are gonna say, okay, 292, or 292.5. Well, I am never gonna appraise something with the 500 at the end. I mean, that's just getting too specific, and
And what's $500?
It's just
So
not.
then would you do 292 or 293?
If I was at 292.5, I would probably do 293. I would
Well, it might
round
depend
up.
on the price, right? If it was
It can.
292, you might just do it 292.
It can't, I
right?
mean,
Yeah.
there was a time when I was appraising things that were like, my appraised value was $26,000. Well, at $26,000, Yeah, for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath brick ranch or whatever. Yeah, I'm not gonna go very far
Right.
off of that. If it comes up to 26.1, I'm not raising up. I'm sticking at 26. But if I'm at, 900,000, was it 900 or 905?
Right, you're so close,
So I'm
yeah.
gonna probably round up, I'm gonna err rounding up, but not all appraisers do the same thing.
26,000 for 32.
Yeah, it was a scary market then. Once you've provided whatever your information to the, and we've gone over the time frame, so, I can carry on. If anybody needs to leave, go for it. But I'm happy to carry on and go as far as we need to. Once you've provided it, the underwriter can choose to provide it to the appraiser or not. It's up to the lender. If they don't think you've made a compelling case, they may not even pass it on to the appraiser. But if they do, the appraiser is required to respond. Even if my response is, that's not an appropriate sale because XYZ. So I may not change the value, but I'm required to respond. Any questions on that dispute process? This is where I said earlier that once things have closed, you may get calls from appraisers asking questions about listings or closings that you've had a while back. Some of the most common things that I end up calling about are basements. So let's say every record I have says the basement's unfinished. Everything says unfinished. But your listing says it's partially finished. And I can see pictures in your listing that are basement pictures that are finished. So clearly there's some finished space there. I'm gonna call and ask how much of it is finished. And I know you haven't measured it, you can't tell me exactly, but if you tell me it's about half finished, even if it's 60%, really, saying it's 50% finished is a whole lot closer and a whole lot more accurate than me assuming it's not finished at all, because that's what tax records say. So the better information I can get, the better for the process. Inconsistencies, like if Georgia MLS says it was a VA loan and FMLS says it was conventional, I may call to see what was it really, or any kind of inconsistency between those two. That's a common one, is that the loan isn't the same in both, or that the seller concessions is different in each. So I may call about that. Clarifications on things like the buyer and the seller both have the same last name. So I'm concerned about, was it really an arm's length transaction? Or was it your Uncle Joe sold you the house and therefore gave you a deal? Yeah, any of that kind of, or the one we talked about earlier where the price just seems out of line with the neighborhood, so what can you tell me about the house? Yeah. When I call agents for something that's 3-4 months old, some agents, like I said, don't even return my call. Never hear from them. Some are hugely helpful and give me great information and insights into the neighborhood and that kind of thing. Be that person. Be the one that's helpful. FHA. If you've got FHA loans, when I do an inspection, all the utilities have to be on. Now that doesn't count cable, internet, phone, but gas, electric, water, sewer, all have to be on, they all have to work. When I call somebody and say, the water's not on, the answer can't be, well, it's just turned off at the street, you just need to go out at the street and turn it back on. No, I don't need to do that. That needs to have been done before I got there. So all utilities have to be operational, all systems have to work. I test the HVAC, and depending on the time of year, whether I'll test both. If it's 95 degrees out, I'm probably gonna be careful about turning the heat on, but we're definitely gonna test the system. I'm gonna test the hot water comes on. So again, well, all you have to do is light the pilot light. No, somebody else needs to have lit the pilot light. I need to be able to turn a tap and hot water comes out.
If they don't do it, can you refuse the appraisal? Like, can you leave?
So normally what I would do is go ahead and do the inspection, because I'm there. I'll go ahead and do the whole inspection, because usually when any of that's happening, it's a vacant house. I'll go ahead and do the whole inspection, but then what's gonna happen, and this is, we're talking FHA here, on that bottom, you know where we talked about subject to something happening? It's gonna be subject to the HVAC actually working, or subject to the power being on. Yep.
So with that, so right now I'm dealing with a buyer client who part of the deal is that they're installing a new HVAC
Okay.
within 3 days before closing. He's on an FHA loan, so as of right now, there's not an operational HVAC system in there. Would that be what you would say? You would
Yep.
go, the lender would schedule you to go out there, and then we're just essentially waiting on that because if it doesn't.
I've been back to houses on the morning of closing.
Okay.
Oh, geez.
Because, to do a final inspection, because, a lot of places, when they're renovating or new construction, they won't put the AC compressor unit outside until the very end because they're afraid of theft. So I've been out the morning of closing to go take a picture of that, to send in a report that says in fact the compressor unit has been installed. Or I go in and turn the HVAC on to say, yes, it's now installed.
And is that something that's then noted to you, so then you know to go back within those 3 days or the day of, or what, and you'll be discussing that with the lender?
So I'll
since
get
I don't
an
interact
order
with you?
from the lender saying, the house is ready to be re-inspected or whatever. I will call whatever agent I was involved with to say, I've gotten a request to go back and check the HVAC, is it ready?
Okay.
So that if it's not, or in that one case, it wasn't gonna be installed until the day before closing. So, okay, I can fit it in my schedule at 8 o'clock that morning, and so went in on the morning of closing. But yeah, I'll reach back out because I've been burned going places when the lender said it's done, I get there and it really isn't.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'll check, but they will make me go back.
They'll make you, it's not you
Yeah.
being a good appraiser that
No.
happens to be a nice person.
Yeah, no, they will require it before they will close the loan.
Okay.
They will require, evidence that
And
it's
if
been.
it didn't happen, then we would just have to maybe do an addendum to change the closing date, essentially?
You'd end up having to change the closing date if it wasn't there. Because if I go out on the morning of closing and there's still no HVAC, they're not gonna close an FHA loan without a furnace.
Okay. Thank you.
All appliances that convey with the property have to be operational. So we know that a fridge, a washer, a dryer, sometimes a microwave, are personal property and may not transfer with the property. But if they do, any appliances that do, I'm supposed to test them. Yep.
I have one under contract for an FHA, and I was told that it has to have a fridge in it, but it currently does not because it's a reno. So do I have to provide them with a fridge? This was in a previous, we had it under contract before, and they're like $500 allowance for the fridge. And the other agent was like, oh no, if it's FHA, you have to have all appliances in there, and this must be turnkey and ready to go.
No, you don't have personal property. You don't need to have, but if it's there, it has to work. But,
Okay. Oh,
yeah.
interesting. So so FHA does not require a fridge in the
Yeah, no.
word. That's very interesting.
If a house was built
That's
prior,
the second line that I found. Okay, interesting.
if a house was built prior to 1978, any paint that's chipping, peeling, fraying, anything, it becomes a problem because of the lead. Anything that would affect safety, security, soundness, structural integrity of the property becomes an issue. So anytime I see water or something that looks like water is coming in, maybe right now it's not dripping, but the ceiling is brown and damp and I don't know if there is a problem. Any kind of safety hazards, exposed wires, high drop-offs to something. We have to test bedroom windows to make sure you really can get out. If the bedroom windows have burglar bars on them, they have to be the quick release kind, because otherwise what's the, still can't get out. Yeah, nobody can get in, but you can't get out in the fire.
Yeah, if it's an older building, they've repainted it, and then like the windows you can barely open. I mean, I'm a pretty strong person, and I'm like fighting to get this window up, you know, then that's something that you'll.
Yeah, if the windows have been painted closed,
Yeah.
I've been in properties like that, that's a problem because you can't get out
Yeah.
in the case of a fire. So we're gonna test windows and they need to open. So all that is safety kind of related things. Cosmetic issues might affect the value, but FHA doesn't care in terms of it qualifying for an FHA loan. So it can be ugly paint, yucky carpet, an outdated kitchen that hasn't been updated since 1967. Depending on the property, you know, that may be factored into the value decision, but that doesn't impede it qualifying for an FHA loan. The last little bit, I have some pictures. If y'all want, we can certainly end here because we've gone over time, so we can certainly stop now. But I've got some pictures if you want to see, to look at, would it or wouldn't it pass an inspection?
Let's see. Plus you're recording so the people online.
Okay. Would that pass an FHA inspection?
For what?
Yes. Wait, what's the hole? The light is making it look like there might be a hole in the wall.
Is there a hole in the wall?
No, there's not a hole in the wall.
Oh, there's just a little thing. Oh, that's just a socket?
That's better.
Is it missing a socket?
Well, how old is the house? I mean, the paint's chipping, but other than that, then.
No, it matters if it's before 1978.
Let's say it's not.
Well, then it's fine.
Then cosmetic. Yes.
Yeah, it may be ugly,
Yeah.
but it's
weird.
just cosmetic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't tell if it's just missing that socket.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Okay. Ooh.
No.
No.
It's called mold.
That ain't gonna happen.
That's problematic, and I'm
That's
gonna,
problematic.
and if it was an FHA inspection, this, I would require an inspection by mold experts. And I wouldn't necessarily, they might not send me back to look at the house, as long as I get an inspection report back from the mold people.
Just cosmetic.
Yeah, artistic and creative,
Is it?
but it's cosmetic.
Issue.
Cosmetic.
That's cosmetic.
It's hard to tell from this picture, but this is actually just kind of a pony wall between like a dining room and a family room or something, so it's not an exterior wall at all. So to me, that's cosmetic.
What
If it were an exterior wall, it wouldn't be cosmetic?
You know, it would depend on how bad it is.
What
I
if it's
might
water
call it
damage?
cosmetic, but if it was very far in, then you've got the ability for critters to come through and that kind of thing. So it's,
If it were wet though, like.
if it was wet, that's a problem.
Okay.
If there's water, that's
You'd
problematic.
see that though with,
You'd see it.
yeah, it would,
You'd see it.
as someone whose home is currently that,
Yeah.
that's not that.
Just dirty.
That's just dirty carpet,
Yeah,
right?
it's dirty
Yeah,
carpet.
that'll pass.
Ooh.
That's a
bad.
problem.
What's
Yeah,
that
why
water
is it a
damage?
problem?
Because the inner workings are exposed.
Yeah, yeah. So you've got the potential for water damage, getting farther and farther into the property.
Exposed wires. They'll fail.
Yeah. Exposed wires, but also water water and critters can get in through that hole.
What if you just, pop it back in there and it sits for a second? Like if the agent does that and you happen to not see it.
When I come back, this particular house had other issues, but, so there was a number of issues, but if I come back and it's up where it belongs, I mean, I'm probably not gonna jiggle it and see if I can pull it out. So there are things that you can probably get away with sometimes, but this particular house has several issues.
So I'm just asking. That's probably not good. Is that exposed plywood?
Yeah, what is that?
I would say that's fail, right? Or is that
Oh, and then
cosmetic?
paint.
This is the,
That's the exterior, right?
yeah, this is the exterior
Like
of the
that's
house.
plywood right there?
Yeah, this
Oh, yeah,
is,
that's not
these
gonna
were
pass.
That would
wood,
fail
it was
water.
wood siding, which is fine, but this is the, what do you call that, like the tie
waterproof
back.
stuff?
Yeah.
That ain't gonna pass.
So that being exposed is not good,
That's a bad fail.
yeah, not good.
And then,
Oh, go back.
Is that water?
what is that?
Wait, somebody said go back.
Would that fail or pass?
Oh, that's so failing.
Okay, I didn't know that was in the basement. Would that be okay? 'Cause
This
Yeah,
is,
if it's
this
on-
is
Stay
the
anywhere near
basement,
that.
where this is,
'Cause I see a lot of
is
that
on the
passes in, like,
stairs
crawl
going down
spaces.
to the
But that's
basement,
not
it was
correct, yeah.
right kind of next to your head as you go down the stairs to the basement. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff like the house I'm dealing with where there's like exposed stuff down in the basement. It's clearly an unfinished basement, but it's kind of neatly stapled or put about for an FHA, is that
So there's a
gonna fail?
difference in wire that's encased in stuff, and then the end is enclosed in a box.
No,
That's
not that
okay.
neat,
But
not
when
that
you've
neat.
got all the ends all exposed, yeah, not good.
So if that's under a crawl space, FHA, that'll fail?
This is actually a basement. This was. So, but yeah,
Okay.
I didn't let this go.
Okay.
Is that water?
Water.
That is water.
Mm-hmm.
Standing water in a
That's a
basement.
big deal.
Nope.
It turned out, this is directly underneath the kitchen, and it turned out the dishwasher was leaking.
Oh, wow.
No.
And
Well,
it
the
was doing
generator's next to it.
some serious stuff down there, yeah.
It's in the gutter.
Is that technically a system that needs to be functional, not like operational?
Oh, the gutter.
That would fail.
So,
Cause you'll get water in your basement.
there you go.
Dang.
This is directing the water directly to the foundation.
Yeah, I figured. I mean, I knew it wasn't
That's
gonna be
tricky
like
one.
working. I just figured
Yeah.
it was one of those
So-
like
so you would
systems
fail that?
needs
I
to
wouldn't
work.
let this go.
Wow.
Some might, but I
Yeah.
wouldn't, because it's sending water directly to where you don't want it to go, and water does damage.
It's like a water hose.
Probably cosmetic.
No, that's lead.
How do you know?
No, that's not.
What age is the home?
So this one, it would depend, and I don't remember,
Well,
but
it
it would
lead paint an
depend.
exterior paint? I've never seen it as
Yeah.
an exterior paint. I don't know.
So anything built before 78, it doesn't matter if the paint's interior or exterior, it's
Sure.
problematic if it's like this. If it's later than 78, this would probably be a problem anyway because there's so much of it. But if it was just one little bit or whatever, it's not gonna matter from the lead standpoint. It's just gonna matter from the standpoint of, is the house still protected, or is there gonna be quicker damage to the house?
It looks like more than
So
paint,
you
though.
would
It
fail
looks like
that?
wood as well.
Yeah.
That
I think
doesn't
it's just
look
the
just like
first
paint
layer
to
of
me. There's some
wood.
damage to the wood there.
But
like-
that's not
Yeah,
going to
so
tie
if there
that
is
down.
damage to the wood, then
Yeah.
that suggests that
How'd you know?
this is a problem, because the paint being scraped off is causing damage to the wood from trees brushing against it, from
Yeah.
water, from
I don't see how that
whatever,
has
so it
cosmetic.
becomes more of a structural issue, yeah.
What is that?
That's a backyard and it's cosmetic and.
I would think that would pass.
What-
Well, it
Is
depends what
that-
kind of crap's out there. Because if it's like, plutonium.
I don't
There
even
you
know
go.
what I'm looking at.
If this is the backyard, or the back of somebody's property, just a bunch of trash dumped there, whatever.
That should pass.
If it's just a bunch of,
It
if
depends
it's
what the safety stuff is.
furniture and whatever, I would let it pass. Maybe it affects the value, maybe it doesn't, depends on what I'm comparing against. But it's not necessarily gonna affect it passing an FHA inspection. In this picture, what I would say might,
What is that?
is this to me looks like some kind of an oil drum.
Mm.
So I don't know what's
It's
really
hazardous
in
waste
there.
material.
There could be some hazardous waste material. So I'm probably, for that, gonna have somebody inspect that to find out what that really is. It may not be a problem, but if it's any kind of hazardous waste material, it could be.
Oh, someone perfectly saw
Like
that.
a tree. It's covered.
It's
Yeah.
sinking.
I mean, it's tasty. You
If
call
this
it.
is an empty pool with no cover, it's a problem.
Really?
Yeah, because
Interesting.
that's a safety hazard.
Like a fall situation?
Yeah, if it's got a cover on it that's stretched enough that you know, if I land on it, it's not gonna go all the way to the bottom, I may,
Do you test that theory often?
Yeah, I do.
Just wondering.
I do, yep.
Looks very
Well, that
trampoline-y
one's
to me.
sinking, so would you still test?
Well, it's still attached
Okay.
enough, yeah,
That needs a railing.
What is
there you go. There's a hot tub in there, which I don't
That's a
know.
hot tub stop.
That's
Yeah.
what is
No, that's a spa area.
But the
So
problem
that
is that there's no railing along the side of that porch, and this is like at least a 4-foot drop.
No, that whole thing
No
is a
railing.
disaster.
Well, there's that too.
Yeah, that's a problem.
That's a problem.
I'm guessing that's cosmetic.
Well, what does that lead to?
I would think you would pass.
Isn't that not
I think
safety
that's
problem?
cosmetic.
I'd call it cosmetic, probably.
Fences you don't have to have a fenced in backyard
You
for it to be
don't.
safe or secure.
Yeah, you don't have to have a fence. Would I make adjustments based on this? Maybe, maybe not, depends how extensive the damage is. Maybe it's enough that I don't give them
I like this
credit for the
game.
fence at all.
Do those need coverings over the sockets? Like outlet covers or no?
Yeah, it's that. To me, it's that socket to the right that's open.
You got exposed wires, don't you, right there on that far right, that box?
Would your answer change at all if I told you this is the kitchen?
Oh, there's.
Oh. It's not functional.
Yeah, this was the kitchen, this was a refi, I called on a Monday, we set up an appointment for the Wednesday. I didn't think to ask if the house had a kitchen, and she didn't think to tell me that on Tuesday, the day before I was gonna go, they were having the kitchen gutted because they're gonna renovate the property.
Wow.
Or renovate the kitchen. And it's gonna be really nice, we're gonna have this and this and this, well,
That's nice.
it's gonna be, yeah, but right now, this is what I see. And a house without a kitchen is not worth as much as a house that does have a kitchen.
But it might pass the loan in terms of safety and all that, it's just.
It's not gonna pass a loan because a house without a kitchen is not.
It's just
not a
gonna
safety
appraise
concern.
so far beneath value that it's like worthless.
Well, so what I would do with this and what I did do is appraise it subject to the kitchen being added.
Yeah.
So we're making the assumption that if it had a kitchen that was nice and fit the neighborhood, it would be worth X. They're not gonna get the loan until there's a kitchen there, and they then send me back out to take pictures of the kitchen.
Yeah, that's too
And-
many high outlets to not, yeah, that's definitely a
Yeah.
kitchen.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, the game's over.
Yeah, sorry.
Thanks, Lisa, that was so
Thank
helpful.
you, sorry.
Yeah, the pictures were
Thank you
great.
so much for that refrigerator clarification, because I was already lied to by that agent the first time we had the house under contract. He said that the inspection was done. I called the inspector. The inspector was like, he canceled 3 hours before the inspection. So then he was like, yeah, we need a $500 allowance for the fridge, and I'm like, I didn't think you had to have a fridge in one that was like a reno or a new construction.
Well, and I don't know what kind of loan they were getting in it, because some of the homeowners assistance kind of.
No, it was regular FHA, like standard FHA. But I was, well, again, he lied to me about the inspection even occurring, so obviously.
So there are a lot of things.
Right, and he was a buckhead agent, I was very upset.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I've been
That was
very
super helpful.
impressed with these classes. I always come to these classes. I was actually not.
Let's do it.
All right, peace.
Later.
Everyone.
And I'm always on the
Yeah.
same thing we were talking about just now.
Bye, Katie.
Bye, Toodles.
But we were right on the line of Alpharetta and Versailles. And I'm struggling for concepts that I have no basement. There just aren't many.
Yeah.
It was a nice one, but I struggled
I've
with
done a
these
lot of
comps.
conventions.
Yeah.
And we did appraise,
very
but,
few
you know, they weren't to be overpriced, of course. We had to change that. But it was one of those things where I was trying to stay in the same school district, I was doing all this survey, trying to but I did go outside the county, just trying to price it, there just weren't any homes. Yeah, and I wondered, what do I do with this? It was just so confusing. Right, they were very
Conventional, I like
yeah.
conventional better. But now, what have I done most of? Just me personally.
Pretty complicated.
FHA.
But I do know that, you try for the school district first and the zip code. You can certainly stay in this county, but I mean, this was one of those things where it was hard, and then everything going north was getting less expensive because this was closer in.
Right. Yeah.
So what's your maximum?
But keep your eyes open.
Going outside, you can't do the circle and you're doing coming this way.
Yeah,
Just stay a couple of miles.
honestly, I've gone
And just stuff that you
for
shine.
40 miles, but that's not usual. That's for, I did a stretch based on sort of what I was working with, where I did several properties over a period of time that were on airstrips. So like, instead of being on a golf course, you're on an airstrip, so you land your plane and taxi right into your hangar in your backyard.
Not many copies of that.
Well, there aren't a lot of those properties, and so sometimes you have to do some maneuvering to find
So,
that's a,
when I used to do a lot of FHA, loans,
normally in town.
I tell them, it's great, it's a good loan. Yeah, I have to put down some money, but it's gonna make, you send me the properties, I gotta really check it out, cause I don't wanna waste your time going out there, cause I don't get FHA approved. So I call it people, hey, we still FHA, I call it. I think no, sometimes I didn't know. But, I look at the pictures, yeah, but most of the cities will know if it's FHA, cause they know that it's price right to the project, you get it. Yeah, absolutely. And they know what condition the home's in. Yeah, yeah. Most of them. Not like, you're like, in this project, you're like,
It's hard, but, I had a listing I saw in the spring that was inside the perimeter in the Lakeside High School area, but it was not in Oak Grove, which is the premier, and it was in Henderson. And so, but it was on the lake, and then the only other recent comp on the lake, was on the same street, had sold for like $250,000 less.
It's not always about price, right?
And I'm just like, well, that thing, if they pull that up, cause it was just barely at 6 months, and I'm thinking,
And they're not
I'm in
looking
trouble here. I've searched comps for so long on that one. Do you know what was really funny? We sold it the first weekend. It was just a great house.
FHA's a great loan.
But what was funny was
Yeah,
so
well,
close.
you just gotta be
The
careful.
lender
Most houses up
was
here in this area will do it.
You know, and it sold for 25
Not all.
over asking, and, so then I was really thinking I'm screwed, you know?
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't think they have this to appraise. So anyway, this guy, he told me, he said, apparently, I said, how'd we do on the, how'd we squeak by on the appraisal? He said, well, he did it. He said, almost did. And he said, apparently we had some really good comps, and they were, I don't know, he can't talk to him, but he knew somebody who talked to him, there's all this stuff going on, so there is stuff that goes on back there. And they let it, he said they went ahead and let that one go, but he said, barely.
I'm actually helping my agent buy a house on his agent.
You know, you really
And so
are,
I've been
but
working
that
on
one
that,
comp
and then
down the street, I
I'm
thought, that's
now
gonna kill us,
looking
it
at,
wasn't the same clump
buddy who
house,
writes
this is custom
screenplays
house.
with.
You're on
He's
a
got
lake,
a big giant
where do you
tract
get
of land in
these?
South
Well,
Georgia.
that's one
So I'm gonna start looking into like land development stuff. So whenever I'm like not doing a movie, I like this year I just sort of was like, this is interesting, this could make big money. So it was like one of my
Oh, I did.
So yeah, so now I'm trying to
You
like
should have seen, I had
close on
trashed all my,
this, we're in due
right, I
diligence
wrote
right
everything on
now.
there in red,
First one.
you know, try to
and
make
just
it
kind of get
clear
as much of
what's
this done
going on,
before I
but
leave
honestly,
for
it
Savannah.
was one of those almost
And then when I get
impossible
back,
things.
you know, I'll have enough
You know,
cash
so
to
it's
be able to
interesting, I
chill
learn
for a
something
few
every
months, so
time
I
that
can
with
maybe
these
just focus
listings,
on like learning
you know, I'm
ins and outs
always
of that
telling
land
people
deal.
up front, you
Until,
gotta
you know,
price
the
it
next
right,
thing
cause you
is
can sell all
after
day
this
long,
real
it's
estate
gotta
looks like
appraise in
it's
the end. It's
I've
gotta
only done,
appraise.
I did the stand-in. I've been an extra before. I've never done any acting.
I know,
I've
but I did one in
stand-in.
East Atlanta Village this year too.
I did it just to see
And I
what
had
it's
helped
about.
him renovate it, you know, we worked
Yeah,
together
God
a little
bless
bit on it.
extras, man. I mean,
But it was
I don't know
just
how to
inside
hold
the
it,
Cap
man.
County
It's-
They need 'em to make
just kind of
movies and
out of
TV
the
shows, so
village.
God bless them, I
So
appreciate
we
them,
were trying to
like, you know.
compare it to
And I thought it was cool
the
that I got on
village,
TV.
but
I
it
got
was
like
actually
a
just
2-second
inside
spot. I was like,
yeah. So it
Yeah,
wasn't
for sure. I mean,
really
that's
It was
East
cool.
Atlanta
People like
Village,
that.
so,
I mean, you know, it's crazy.
it
and
was
that's kind of why I
bad.
did it, just to meet the, and I
Anyway.
met famous people. So,
It's dicey.
Yeah,
So I go
which
to
is
every
cool,
one of
like,
these
they just
classes,
treat you like
you know,
cattle.
I see one
It's
thing
crazy
and
because
I'm
people
there
like, I mean, look, I as
still
an
trying
actor,
to
like,
figure out
God bless
this
extras. Like,
because
I
it's
learned from
just
Sam
the more
Rockwell, like,
helpful I
be
can
really
be
nice
to
to
the
extras.
seller
Like,
in terms
extras
of
are
trying to
people
get
too.
the right
Like,
compliment.
be fucking decent.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
That's
don't
where
be an
you
asshole.
have to know what you're doing.
They were nice to us.
It's like,
It's
I'm
you
like
know,
the
with this
poor
staff,
actor on
here's the
set,
stats.
but I'm
Yeah,
still
she was
getting
saying
paid
you gotta be
grand to
honest
be
and
there
let
for
these
the
people
day.
know.
Yeah,
This
versus
guy's getting
the-
paid $50.
That
He's
has
there
a
like
lot
8
to
more
do
hours than me.
with
And like, you know, I get treated like a king.
And if you're in,
Yeah,
if you're, like you
fed
said, I'm
PBJ
just in Southern
sandwiches
County,
until Santa
I'm not in the city of
Monica,
Atlanta,
like-
I'm not
I
to be
like that.
East Atlanta Village,
They
but
made
the
us,
village has
we
more
didn't make a
cachet.
lot. We made
You know,
probably
how do you price it? It's total renovation, it's
150 a day or
gorgeous.
something.
You know, it's-
It was like
You got a great rate, man.
Yeah, it was like
You
18 an
got a
hour or
Cops just
something
weren't
like
as
that.
That's amazing for extras.
Now we were there like 12 hours.
Yeah.
And on our feet, we're tired. They paid us actually pretty good. Now we didn't get the same food the actors got. They actually catered it in. I was like, damn.
Yeah, for sure.
But I was at one of the better ones. I've heard nightmares.
Yeah, no, I know when they were like some movies.
I was over here at
While he
Eagle
was
Rock
getting it
Studios.
done,
in
then I
Norfolk.
was like, what the
It was a
hell
better
am I gonna do
studio.
with this?
Yeah,
You know, and
sure.
I did that
But
for
it just
months,
depends on how much money
you're
you're
just
spending.
really not
But,
exactly in the
I've only
chicken
done
part,
it a
but
few
you're
times.
not.
It's not nothing. Because you're right, extras is.
But I thank you for all of this, and I really
That's
did
tough.
get
I mean,
something
but God
out of
bless
it.
the
I
people that
always
do.
do.
That's just what I'm.
That's cool that you do that.
It's
Everything
always,
is awesome.
very helpful, she'll probably get it.
Maybe, bro. I like right now I'm playing this movie.
Once she
It's
knows you're good, then
Jerry
you're on the
O'Connell and
hook.
Justin Long, and I'm on like me and Jerry O'Connell are buddies, and I'm an ex-con who's going to like rob this like there's all this money tied to this property, and we're gonna like rob this property, but I end up like having to work with kids, and the kids sort of changed me, and it's cool. Yeah, so that'll be fun.
That's cool being an actor. We did a lot of like in town.
That's what Dory was like saying, oh, when I was first